give you sort of the fizz and the excitement.
D'Italia, l'Italia. Yes, I have been paying attention, and yes, I am ready to get my heart broken. If anybody is listening to this that is a Ferrari fan, I will say that my Ferrari fandom is purely tied to Lewis Hamilton, so I apologize for the appropriation there. Hello and welcome to Athlantic, the show where an American and a Brit take turns crossing the pond to learn about sport culture in the UK and the USA. I'm your resident American, Adam Jordan.
And I'm your resident Brit, Harry Collins. Adam, who is our patron saint for episode 30?
I'm so glad that you asked. Episode 30 is very exciting, and because 30 is a really great, solid sports number for a good number of sports. Didn't Messi wear 30 when he was at PSG?
Very good, Adam John. I didn't think you were going to pull that off.
Yeah,
he did. I think he wore it at Barcelona as well in his very, very early days.
Oh,
he wore 30 and then 19 and then obviously 10.
Interesting. I was wondering why he wore 30 at PSG. I'm sure there's reasons for that other than the tie to his first number, but maybe not. Anyway, I'm glad that there's some previous connection to it. That's kind of cool. So yeah, today's patron saint is Lionel Messi, number 30. No, I kid. There are lovely, so many lovely ones. Like I said, there's it's a great sports number for hockey, for baseball. I guess maybe it's a little less so than I thought, actually, because now that I think about it through baseball and football, there's not as many. Basketball, there's some solid 30s. Kenny the Jet Smith wore number 30 while at Carolina. He may have worn in the NBA, I don't remember. But anyway, this number 30 is very special. It's one Matt Murray, a former goaltender for the Pittsburgh Penguins, one of the absolute heroes of my high school years and early college years, because he brought the Pittsburgh Penguins to back-to-back Stanley Cup championships as a rookie. Technically, his first season, he hadn't even yet he hadn't played a full NHL season yet, but he got really hot, started in the playoffs, led the team to the 2016 Stanley Cup championship, and then in 2017 that was his first season and full season in the NHL, and he ended up leading the team to a second straight Stanley Cup title. His tenure with the Penguins ended with a whimper for sure. A lot of people thought that he was going to be kind of the next great goaltender after such an amazing start and great pedigree from his previous, from his AHL, which is the minor league. His great starts there. A lot of people thought he was going to be the next generation or goalie of a generation, and then he just kind of fizzled out, unfortunately. But that said, we still love him. He's a legend. And the patron saint is a great opportunity to give Harry and all of our viewers lessons on my Pittsburgh sports fandom.
So I've got a question that will pertain to, especially after we get through the 30s and the 40s, the limited number of athletes that we can talk about.
Yeah.
In hockey, I know it's the case in American football, but in baseball and basketball, do you know if certain numbers belong to certain positions?
Good question. The answer is no. It's just most of the numbers. I guess it's actually the same thing in football and soccer, where the number, you could technically wear any 2-digit number there is, I think, but it would be weird to see a striker wear, or really anybody wear number 81. That would just you wouldn't see that very often. And the same is the case in hockey. Usually single digit, usually forwards will wear kind of whatever. But single digit numbers are usually reserved for for defensemen, except for the number 1, which goalies wear a lot. And then goalies usually wear number 1, number 30, number 29, 31, usually right kind of in that pack is a solid goalie range. But yeah, and you also usually don't see a lot of. Sorry, now I'm thinking about this more. This is an interesting question. We didn't prep this. I'm just
traditionally in soccer, your goalie always wears 1.
Okay.
And then your backup keeper normally wears 13 or any other number.
Okay.
But 13 is a very common goalie number. I think it's the idea of deliberately being unlucky. Some
Okay,
people
I
think
like it.
lucky number 13. Then way back in the olden days, you didn't have any numbers higher than 11. And when you were subbed on and off, you wore the number of the position you played. So 3 was always a right or a left back. 4 and 5 were typically centre backs. 6 and 8 were in the middle, which is why we refer to those positions as playing in the 6 or the 8. 10s are either strikers or like that advanced midfielder.
Yep.
And then normally 7 is a right winger and like 11 is a left winger.
Yeah.
But obviously that becomes like that becomes like a self-fulfilling kind of prophecy, because the most iconic players obviously wear the lowest numbers,
Right.
because it looks clean and great, and there is legacy there. So I think you always look at, a player's prestige relates in their team relates to kind of how low or how close their number is to their position number.
Interesting.
Other than some players that have like made it their brand, like
Sure.
Declan Rice will wear probably 41 forever.
Sure.
Yaya Toure wore 42. That's really cool.
I feel like they used to be pretty similar in baseball as well, because like baseball, the numbers, I think when they first came out, and don't quote me on this, but I think when like they first started wearing uniform numbers in baseball, it was contingent on where in the batting order that you hit. So it was like 1 through 9. That's what you had. So like, yeah, I think there was there's a little bit of similarity there. And it used to be like, I remember when I was a kid, like if you were wearing a really high number, like if your number were in the like 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, that just meant you were a bad player that like hadn't gotten a chance to like you hadn't earned your time in the big leagues yet if you had like one of those high numbers. But now guys just kind of like use it for their personality, but it's like it's a reflection of who they are. It's a reflection of their personality. If you've played sports, like you've got a connection to your number. Like my usernames on a lot of things, like my email still has a 15 in it because that's the number I wore when I was playing baseball as a kid. But yeah, so it's interesting that like soccer is the only sport where I've ever heard a number refer to a position. Like I always hear of like a classic number 9 or a number 10. I didn't even know that like number 7 or number 6 or something like that was a thing.
But in American football, quarterbacks are almost always like 0 to 10 or something, aren't they?
Yeah, so
0 to 9.
It's pretty much it's usually more like you'd see like some guys will be like 2. It's usually like 2 through like 18, pretty much.
Okay, right. Yeah, Tom Brady 12, obviously.
Tom Brady 12, Peyton Manning, famously number 18. Plenty of number 10s, Eli Manning.
Rodgers
so many
8.
7s, yeah. Like we just it turns into the name some dudes podcast. But yeah, so like there's those traditions, and in the NFL there used to be, up until like a few years ago, more stringent, like only certain numbers could be for certain positions. Now I think they still restrict linemen on what they can wear. Like I think they have to be in the 50s, 60s, or 70s. But anyone else, I think, is kind of fair game to do whatever now. So
that's cool.
Yeah. So I think that's
now. Since we last recorded, we did the Winter Olympics preview episode. Thank you very much for to those listening for the reception on some of our short form videos and to our to the episode itself, the podcast episode itself. Adam and I both I learned so much, and it made my enjoyment of the Winter Olympics all the more enjoyable, knowing that I now know what skimo is, and I knew what the monobob was. But since then, plenty of things that we didn't get to talk about in the preview episode. We've cracked right on with the T20 World Cup. England are into the Super 8. That means the whole nation can focus on cricket instead of rugby at the moment, because the Six Nations is going pretty poorly. We've had, a couple of weeks ago, we had an incredible Duke Carolina basketball game, which saw, I think, Carolina were winning the game for less than a second.
Yes.
and
Yes.
we walked away with the win.
Yes.
And we've had Formula One testing, which we will come back and talk about in a little bit in the body of our episode. But Adam, I think you want to take a moment to talk to us about the highlight of your Winter Olympics.
Yes. The win.
Which only unfolded a couple of days ago.
Yeah, only unfolded a couple of days ago, and like within the past like week or so, where the U.S. women's and men's hockey team won Olympic gold together, which has never happened before because unfortunately women's hockey was only in the Olympics starting in 1998. But the both over Canada, just glad that we got those matchups because those were the best. Like those are the matchups both on the men's and women's side that like if they didn't happen, because they didn't play in the group stage, it would have been a massive, massive disappointment. So it was really fun. I mentioned previously in the previous episode, you can go back and like see why we were all excited for that. But hopefully at this point, you know about it. So that was really cool. It was the first time the men's team had won gold since 1980. It was really, really exciting. Unfortunately, my favorite player in the whole world on Team Canada, Sidney Crosby, wasn't able to play. So that was awesome until the men's hockey team decided to make complete asses of themselves and ruin it all, which honestly, if you've been following our U.S. men's national team, the one made up of NHL players for any sort of time, you're not surprised much as I was. And there were plenty of things that were wrong, but I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole on that. What I will say is that that women's gold medal mattered. They dominated more than the men did. The women's team has been carrying our national program for years. They have been superior for years in terms of their records, in terms of their competition. They've been nothing short of terrific, and they deserve all the respect in the world, not as charity, but because they're amazing athletes. And
Yeah, big time.
all I'll say is go and check out the PWHL. It's back this week. So
I'm very grateful that at a time when both of our nations are struggling through such deeply entrenched domestic misogyny, that on the global stage, our women's teams are so brilliant.
yeah. Alyssa Liu was the symbol of the Olympics in the U.S. And like usually a figure skater often is in the Winter Olympics, but like the fact that as an American who like did her thing on her own terms, like so cool. I don't know how much that broke through over there, but yeah, she's an amazing. We could make this if we wanted to. We could make this into the Olympics recap episode, but we'll avoid that temptation. But yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I just after the 2025 that we had with the Red Roses winning and the Lionesses winning, and now America with the women's international soccer team still in the top 5, top 3, I think. And now at the Olympics, the opportunity to sit on the world stage where America doesn't typically do that often in sports that are played around the world.
Yeah.
We're just so grateful that we have such resilient, inspiring women's teams to remind us that there is such total bollocks happening at home that we can persevere through. Those teams are the teams that we are most proud of. They are the teams that win the most.
Hey, only one soccer team in England has brought it home since 1966. So
only one soccer team has ever done it more than once.
Yeah,
winning anything. And I've been lucky enough to see them do it twice in my lifetime. Parking what has been a good couple of weeks talking about the Winter Olympics with the closing ceremony. We can shelve that for 4 years and now turn our attention to the beginning of something new. We get to, as we alluded into in the news segment, we get to look forward to the new Formula One season, which I genuinely think has the potential to be the most exciting F1 season we've had in 15 years, which is important because I think you and maybe somebody else that we both know has maybe become a little tiresome, maybe become a little fatigued with Formula One as it stands.
Shout out producer Adam's dad.
Yes. So my question before we build into the crux of today's episode is, have you paid any attention to the preseason testing? Does anything give you sort of the fears and the excitement?
D'Italia, l'Italia. Yes, I have been paying attention, and yes, I am ready to get my heart broken. If anybody is listening to this that is a Ferrari fan, I will say that my Ferrari fandom is purely tied to Lewis Hamilton, so I apologize for the appropriation there of your glorious victory anthem. I know it's your national anthem too, but it's really the Ferrari anthem. So my membership at the Tifosi is very much conditional at this point. We'll see what happens whenever Lewis eventually stops racing in F1, which we don't need to think about. But yes, I was paying attention. I am all in on that Ferrari is not going to disappoint this year, but it looks really interesting at the top. But I won't steal your thunder on the testing.
It's so what's so what one of the fun quirks about Formula One, and I use fun really liberally because it's going to become an important talking point later on, is when we have rule revisions, it throws the field open, and we can see new periods of dominance and new answers to technical and competitive questions answered. And in 2026, we're seeing the biggest change to the Formula One rules that we've ever seen. There has never been a bigger change from one car and one set of rules to the next.
I mean, literally, just physically looking at one car to the next, it's just like it's wildly different.
Yes.
Like I remember, what was it, 2022 when the rules last changed, and like that was a significant change to the car, but it didn't really feel like it. It didn't really feel like it threw a ton of. Like it didn't feel as earth shattering because the cars looked fairly similar. You had
Very
similar
much.
teams at the top. Obviously, this 2021 era McLaren that I have above me, that the ground effect era, the last era of rules, certainly ended very well for McLaren. They perfected it over years, but like that took time. So like things felt pretty similar. But now, again, if you've been watching testing, things are thrown all over the place. We don't know what to expect, but we've kind of been expecting the unexpected because, like you said, it's been a seismic change.
And this has the potential to actually also be a bit of a letdown because there's a chance that the most exciting thing happens in testing, and then we get to Melbourne in a couple of weeks and just one team have cracked it and they run off with the title. Now, we cannot stress how much of a bad thing that would be because today we want to talk about whether or not Formula One has the attention of America. Whether or not Formula One will arrive properly at maybe the fourth or fifth time of asking, like the Beatles or like soccer. And I'm not sure I have a dog in either race, but what I want to talk about today is the different approaches that have been necessary for both soccer and Formula One to try and capture that white whale of the American sports market. And also whether or not that American sports market either needs or has an appetite for a sport like Formula One.
Yeah.
Either through saturation in the sports market already, or if Formula One just presents such an alien model of sport that it's not attractive.
Yeah.
So while we're not going to talk about, the specific rules in 2026, but we know that deliberate changes have been made by the organizers and by the rule writers, by the legislators to make the cars race more closely
Yep.
and to have more overtaking. And again, we still don't know whether or not that will come to fruition.
Yep.
But Formula One making that intentional choice at a time where it's been trying so hard to break into America, maybe that's an acknowledgement that the entertainment factor has to improve.
Yeah, essentially this is going to be I don't want to say a report card, but let's say a status report on F1 in America. We're not here to necessarily claim one thing or another of has America embraced Formula One, how Americanized is Formula One, because that question gets thrown around a lot with how much money has been thrown around, how many Grands Prix there are in America now, and that gets thrown, like I said, it gets thrown around a lot. But that's we're kind of here for a status report and to see why or why not America has taken to Formula One and what that path might look like in the future, maybe. So I'm going to let everybody in on a little bit of Athlantic inside baseball here. So we have this thing that Harry and I talk about as we're coming up with the episodes, as we're writing them, researching, that we like to keep in mind, kind of, we have it at the top of all of our rundowns and agendas, called the 80-20 rule. Harry, would you care to explain to the people what the 80-20 rule is?
Of course. Given the model of Athlantic, where we often talk about things that we both know plenty about, often we have episodes like the snooker episode or the FA Cup, for instance, where the 80-20 rule dictates how we write the episode, so that I know, because we are talking to hopefully audiences that are both British and American, we want the episodes to be engaging to both audiences, albeit we know that it will be to different extents.
Yeah.
So whenever we're writing our scripts, we make sure that if I'm talking about football and I know producer Luke knows plenty about football, I still want Luke to learn 20% of the episode's content, because otherwise it wouldn't be engaging for the English audience.
Whereas
And
the 80% side is for the producer Adam's dad or the producer Blake, who might be listening and don't know as much about football, and they're going to be learning 80% of things.
Yes, but in any episode, we want both sets of audiences to learn something. And then, if you've noticed, we typically alternate between whether or not I'm leading an episode or Adam's leading an episode in terms of which audience is being spoken to, and therefore which audience is receiving the 80 or the 20%. Today, we are going to refer generally as if everyone comes in with a sort of base 60 or 70%. We're not going to go through technical specifications. We're not going to go through the rules themselves, but we're also assuming that, Formula One is an open wheel, single formula racing.
We're essentially assuming you've seen the F1 movie, because that's like that's basically all that you need to know, and like may have heard of Drive to Survive at the very latest. If you haven't, we'll do another episode for you sometime. Apologies. Let's just jump straight into kind of the where motorsports is in America, because I think that really helps kind of frame things.
Great.
So we talked about in episode 15 very extensively. That was the in-person episode about what the similarities and differences are and where kind of the iniquities lie within our two relative sporting systems, and what makes them produce different outcomes both in watching and playing, and from A to Z or A to Z with all of the with all that, there's the 20%, with all of the with kind of our outcomes of sport. In this case, we're kind of gonna do the same thing, but to set the stage, America has such a fragmented motorsports culture. Feels like to me, in Europe, in the UK, throughout really the rest of the world for that matter, that yes, there's MotoGP, yes, there's rally car, which we'll talk about at some point, but that feels like almost an entirely different domain. if you're talking about people going on a track in a motorized vehicle, going around it as quickly as they can, you're probably thinking F1. Like, I correct me if I'm wrong, Harry, is there something other than like the feeder, the F2, F3, F4, F1 Academy? Like, is there anything else that I'm missing there?
No, we have a touring car,
Okay.
which is a very, very, I think now a shrinking motorsports sort of discipline, which is kind of actually looks a lot more like NASCAR with kind of stock cars that look like real life cars. I know in other countries, Australia has their supercar series. The Germans love racing trucks. We also
Okay.
enjoy like endurance racing, but that also happens in the US. Like Le Mans comes around once a year,
Yep.
and
Oh,
lots of
sure.
people pay attention. But none of these come close to the behemoth that is Formula One.
Yeah, so that is the standard of that. Yeah, of you're on a track, you're going around it in like a couple hours, and that's it. That's the standard, the top level that you're watching. In America, certainly, as we'll continue to explore, and is obvious, I think, to everybody watching and listening. That certainly exists. There's 3 Grands Prix in America. There's Vegas. There's Miami. There's Austin there. But we also have these 2 other behemoth racing circuits that have much bigger races in the American sporting calendar. Certainly, you have the Indy 500, which is an absolute staple. It's one of the biggest races in the world. It's one of the most legendary races in the world, and that is through IndyCar, which, despite what most people outside of IndyCar fandom think, there is an entire circuit around IndyCar. It's not just the Indy 500 that they're racing one time a year. They do race throughout throughout a whole season. And then, of course, there's NASCAR that we covered extensively in one of our early episodes. So the our attention is very much fragmented. Like, if you want to go to a race, if you're a fan of motorsports, you have options of like Top Flight, and all of them are very different. They have different specifications, they have different intricacies, and they really have, for the most part, I'd say, different crowds. Maybe Indy and NASCAR kind of overlap a little bit more, but they're still fairly different.
So I'm glad you brought up specifically IndyCar because I think Indy is a probably the closest thing that we can cross compare in terms of the sports, where that IndyCar has nothing to do with Formula Sports and nothing to do with the Formula Series. It's not governed in the same way. The cars just happen to look similar.
Yeah, can you
Now,
like explain that actually, like, real quick? That you told me this before we started recording, and I didn't realize this, but like, we were talking about the difference between like a spec series and a
sure.
formula series. Can you describe, first of all, like, why formula is called formula, and like what makes that different, like, in a nutshell?
Sure. So, specification series such as NASCAR and IndyCar focus mostly on the drivers. And to do so, the specifications of the cars are very, very similar. And they are drawn similarly through very strict rules, such as all Indy cars share a chassis.
Yep.
They all have the same chassis. And you have a choice of 1 or 2 different engines.
Yep.
In NASCAR, I think there are only 3 or 4 engine manufacturers. The bodies can look slightly different, based on, hey, this is a Toyota. Hey, this is a Chevrolet. They don't resemble a Camry or a Camaro in any way. But, they're trying.
We didn't cover this
But,
in the NASCAR episode, but they used to, man. They used to basically be Chevy. There were no Camrys back in the day, but they like had Chevys and Ford, and they were basically just dropping engines into them.
But the chassis, a lot of the gearboxes, the brakes are all standardized. They're all bought by the same people. They're all moderated, and they're all standard across everyone. So the difference is maybe your tactical setup on a weekend, and how brave the driver is and how talented the driver is. In a formula series, the formula is the rule book, but unlike Spec series where it seems to be, this is effectively a tube and everything down it must be the same. Formula, it seems like the rules are treated like checkpoints. So your car has to be this dimension. It can't exceed this. Your car this year has to have 2 wings. They can have aero, moving aero components. Your cars, the engines have to be a certain size and they have to have a certain amount of hybrid assist. The formula is a far more open, more interpretable set of rules. But because there is so much money in engineering in Formula One, which is one of the things I love most about it, the way that the formula and the rules are interpreted actually brings cars via evolution to look very, very similar.
Yeah.
If one team have just come out and come up with a solution that is working so much better than everybody else, the other teams will copy it, and we will end up with this more homogenized, very similar car. And the margins in Formula One are found, albeit still in the rules, sort of just by kind of tinkering.
Yeah.
Which means actually, for the most part, by the end of the season, the difference between different Formula One cars might be the same amount as the difference between spec cars. The difference, the fundamental difference between spec and Formula One, while we see it in 2026, is when we get a huge revision of the rules, teams can go wild. And depending on how good your lawyers are and how well you've read the team rules, different solutions can appear very quickly. And what we've seen in Bahrain and the Barcelona testing is some wildly different answers to the same questions. And that's really exciting. The first couple of races in this season, nobody knows who will win. You can't take any real lessons from the timing sheets. You can take what maybe the drivers are saying about how confident they feel in the car. But yeah, that's the difference between the spec series like NASCAR and IndyCar and the Formula series. Now, Adam mentioned earlier, episode 15, where we talked about the difference in sports models between the US and the UK. And to be clear, spec series are not just an American thing.
Sure.
We have that in endurance racing. We have that in some in many other motorsport disciplines here. But the use of a spec series is a method for competitive balance, which American leagues and American sports systems rely heavily on. Making sure that everyone uses the same engines is a similar rule to making sure that the worst teams in the NBA get a good draft slot. It is all about keeping the competitive balance as finely positioned as possible so that the athlete makes the difference.
Yeah, you're never too far off from competing. Whereas,
yeah, exactly.
To your point,
the worst team in NASCAR is far closer to the best team in NASCAR than the worst team in F1 is to the best team in F1.
I think it's important to key in on, because for the people like me, who I would consider the average casual American F1 fan, I got into the sport around COVID because of Drive to Survive. That came out, thought it was pretty cool. I hadn't even, I'd heard of Lewis Hamilton, but didn't really know much about him when I started watching. I knew that the cars looked like Indy cars, and I knew that there was a lot of swankiness to the races. There's a lot of posh and Monaco's. My image of the people to watch the races were people that sit on yachts at Monaco. And then Drive to Survive comes in. You're like, ooh, there's these fascinating personalities. The inner workings of this team. This is like a soap opera. This is amazing. This is like watching it's more like watching reality TV. This is amazing. It's so cool. And it's tied to a sport. How much fun. And then you watch the product. Maybe you get into it for a little bit because of those stories. You watch the next year. Okay, this looks pretty similar. Oh, they're changing the rules here in 2022 after 2021 in Abu Dhabi, and this is the greatest finish ever to a season. And then 2022, and you're like, oh, okay, these cars are different. Okay, they're not really like racing that closely. Okay, it seems like if you qualify first, you're probably going to be in a good spot to win the race. And it just over time gets a little boring. Max Verstappen wins every other race, or every race sometimes. McLaren's out in front every race. There's a nice title fight last year, but like, man, at least in IndyCar and NASCAR, they're racing side by side, and that's pretty cool. Like, so for someone like me, I've kind of fallen off because I'm like, all right, I'll see if like Lewis can do something, but at the beginning of the season, seems like they're not that good. I'll cut on a race, but I'm not gonna like follow that closely.
So you make a very good point, and I want it to be known. The 2023 season is the worst, statistically speaking, the worst season of F1 ever, because it was Max Verstappen won like 90% of the races.
It's crazy.
It was really silly.
Wildly impressive, but like doesn't make for
good for
interesting television product.
Yeah, but the same was said about Hamilton in the 2010s. And actually, Formula One's lowest point, maybe ever, was not in terms of like tragedy. There have been plenty that we will talk about.
Maybe when
on.
People died was the lowest point, Harry.
But the moment of danger for Formula One was in 2015, where viewership reached the lowest numbers it had had for decades. And the former, what was he, the chairman or the CEO? Bernie Ecclestone.
Yeah.
Refused to market to young people. And so the turning point was Liberty Media came in, bought Formula One, and immediately revised social media activity. The first practice of the next season, Red Bull were encouraged to post a day in the life of Daniel Ricciardo.
Cool.
And then the following day, there was a live stream or a time lapse of Mercedes just building a car from scratch. And these bits of media, social media specifically, have nothing to do with the racing. But it indicated very early how Liberty Media were going to tackle your problem with Formula One. Because by the time we got to Drive to Survive, Liberty Media realized Formula One in its purest form will always have periods of dominance.
Sure.
And there are things that you can do to break that up, including introducing a new racing format called the sprint race, where some stronger teams over short distances might be able to do better.
Yep.
And also by changing the rules and having a blank slate where if your team lower down the table has more opportunity in the wind tunnel, because as you said, that's one of the few competitive balance advantages that you get for being, not so successful in Formula One, then maybe when you get a new rule change, they have an advantage. And we hoped that we would see that this year. Williams, we know, has been working on this car basically the whole of last year. So we think that there might be a shake-up. But what Liberty Media realized is in order to defy the monotony of those dynasties, you have to make new fans invested in the people. And Formula One had never done that before. You had, as you said, your huge names, Schumacher, Hamilton, Alonso, Senna, PK, Hunt, these massive celebrities, but you rarely got to know the guys in the bottom quarter of the table. But what Drive to Survive did was humanize everyone, bring them into their world, and suddenly athletes like Daniel Ricciardo became super famous and charismatic, and people loved him. Gunter Steiner.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
what a character.
Gunter Steiner, who
People-
like otherwise is like, okay, he's the team principal for a really bad team. Like,
he's not even a good team principal.
No.
But people love him because he swears and he's funny.
yeah,
And so people started to watch Haas.
yeah.
Sorry, America, and the people of Banbury, where I was born. Haas just aren't it. They're not the team that everyone are rooting for. But for a bit, we loved Gunter Steiner, and we would look out for him.
And
Liberty Media made driver to engineer conversations way more broadcasted. They happened, but we heard so many more of those conversations.
Yeah.
We heard people be stressed. We can now hear from team bosses during the race.
Yeah.
How often do they cut to Zach Brown talking about, oh man, we're having a great race out here, and we're like, we get it. McLaren are good. Liberty Media recognized your issue with Formula One and said the way that we beat this, the way that we penetrate the American market is by playing the American game.
right.
America is the king of entertainment.
So-
not necessarily sport, but often sport as well.
All right, you can argue, but here's where I am. I think this conversation can take an interesting turn because, yes, they figured out, hey, maybe if you make the people interested, and like, yes, there is the tale that like Bernie Ecclestone was like, the young people aren't buying tickets, they're not paying, they're not like, they don't have the money, so like, why would we pay attention to them? And then Liberty comes in and is like, hey, what actually if we said maybe we throw a bone to the young people or to people that don't previously care? That's all fine and great. If the sport itself isn't something that seems wildly competitive and like anybody can win any race, fundamentally, is that something that can appeal to Americans? And if Liberty or the FIA or whomever is deciding that we need to change the racing itself to appeal to more fans like me, to make it more competitive race to race, is that do we think they're doing that? And also, is that a good thing? Because then you get into the whole like 11 of 20 owners of the Premier League are American and they're not fans of promotion relegation. And then you're having more American ownership throughout the rest of Europe. And then you're getting talks of super leagues and you're getting talks of changing the sport entirely and the financial structures. And like, is Formula One going to get to a place where they're making it so every car is racing in a pack? You know what I mean? Like, because that's not the sport. But is that what appeals to Americans?
Well, according to the Formula One end of year report, viewership is up everywhere.
So Adam is just a curmudgeon.
It kind of has been working. Specifically, Drive to Survive definitely reinvigorated people's appetite for Formula One, despite 2 years of Red Bull dominance that were particularly unwatchable. And I say that I'm a huge Lewis Hamilton fan. I loved Hamilton's dominance, but it was not good for the sport. I think genuinely we've had two, specifically in the hybrid era, we've had two sets of technical rules that have kind of been duds. And we've had two sustained periods of dominance, Hamilton and then straight into Verstappen. You could argue that Red Bull had it before Hamilton as well,
Yeah.
before that Mercedes
Yeah.
period. But before then, we had in the 2000s, Ferrari won 4, then we had McLaren won 2, we had Brawn, then
Yeah,
we had Red Bull.
you had Renault win too with Alonso.
Renault won 2 in
Yep.
6 and 7. So that is where Formula One wants to get back to. Because you're right, that is where the fun is. But also, let's not just look at necessarily just periods of dominance. Last year, the title came down to the final race.
Yep.
And in the last 15, 20 years, the final race has decided the title on 8 occasions, which isn't enough, but like it's not entirely dire.
And two
And I
of them
think
have been
there
in the
are-
past 6 years, 5 years.
True.
You know?
And the 2021 one, like scandalous as it was, would probably have been the extension of Hamilton's dominance and would have compromised Red Bull another one. So that's not a very good example. But viewership is improving in emerging markets. China has started watching 39% more Formula One. The USA, the growth is 11%. In heritage markets, there's viewership growth as well, 24% in the UK and 12% in Italy. Italy might be the only country outside of the UK that like cares more deeply about a team than anywhere else in the world. I think, yes, Formula One needs to make sure that racing is closer, but I don't think that is specifically the biggest problem, the biggest barrier for Formula One in the US. And Formula One has been in the US since its inception. The first ever World Championships had a round, the third round was in Indianapolis. It was the Indy 500, which means, and this is just a quirk of Formula One statistics, technically, amongst every driver that's ever raced a race in Formula One, the majority of them have been American, because the Indy 500 was a official part of the FIA F1 World Championships, and therefore anyone that took part in the Indy 500 that year, regardless of whether or not they raced in other F1 races,
They counted.
counted as an F1 driver.
That's a fun bit of trivia.
That is a fun bit of trivia.
Yeah, so like my curmudgeonness aside about the racing. I don't even want to say curmudgeonness. Maybe it's just skepticism about the racing. Like it's certainly a very American centric view, a very again, as somebody who only came into the sport because of Drive to Survive, and like, yeah, I knew about I've like read about Michael Schumacher and Fernando Alonso, and probably back to I know some of the history of it and people before that certainly, but yeah, it's a very it's very much based on like what I've kind of seen, and not what, like, my ideal of it is based on what I've seen and not what maybe it has been before. So but what's interesting is kind of getting back to this idea of American motorsports being fragmented is like, I wonder too how many of those audiences overlap and how many don't, and are there, like, because of that, are there a bunch of like dormant could be racing fans in the US, or are there a bunch of dormant could be F1 fans in the US? Like, I don't know.
I think, that's a good question, because Formula One is making a real effort with the US, not only Drive to Survive, but like for the first time since 1982, F1 has 3 races in the US, which, number one, it's crazy that that's happened before.
Yeah.
like the US, this huge entertainment market, has been this white whale for Formula One forever.
It's the sleeping
And
giant.
now, this sleeping giant, now we have 3 races in 3 different time zones, 2 of them in 2 of the most money forward camp cities, and one of them in Texas, which is like, is Texas a stronghold for NASCAR?
Awesome. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't say it's like a traditional stronghold, but like the Texas Motor Speedway like has a great race every year. Like there's definitely a big fandom there. And like Austin as a city is like Coda is obviously an amazing track, but like Austin as a city, even though it's kind of far from the track, is like that's like a big enough city. Like that's,
Sure. But the probing, I think Formula One couldn't do more to put its product in front of so many specifically young American racing fans.
Yeah.
And maybe, honestly, we're talking about this. Number one, we're talking about the watershed moment being Drive to Survive. Only time will tell if that is the case. Whether or not this new season gets the same viewership or whatever. If it starts to die off, maybe it was a blip. But we are way too close to the epicenter there to know if viewership numbers are going to trend in a different way. What I'm interested in knowing from you is, do you think the appetite for IndyCar or NASCAR is waning?
Well, that's just the thing. Is like talking about the viewership being fragmented. NASCAR and IndyCar see what F1's doing, and yeah, they'll all publicly say that they're that when the people running those respective series are asked about F1 or asked about what one of the other circuits is doing or series is doing, they'll say, oh well, the growth of racing in any league is or in any series is growth for us. But there's, I'm sure, some reality there, and I don't know the numbers behind it enough to, or some of the audience research behind it enough to know the true differentiation, but there's surely some competition there. And F1 and NASCAR and IndyCar have definitely been trying to expand to different markets. NASCAR's tinkered all over the place. They turned they used to race at Charlotte Motor Speedway twice and on the oval track, and then they turned one of the races into a road course to make it a little bit more exciting, and then that lasted about maybe 5 years, and now this year they're going back to racing back on the oval twice. NASCAR's also done street races in Chicago, and they've done a preseason exhibition race in the Los Angeles Coliseum, around a football field. IndyCar is expanding to other street circuits around the country. They're trying all sorts of new broadcast things. They're doing they're trying to expand just as much as F1 is. So that, I think, is a very real, that's not going to stop anytime soon.
Right. So what I want to ask you, if we can exclude, let's just park the conversation about the competitiveness and how exciting the races are.
Yeah.
Because I think there are instances in all 3 of these sports that we're mentioning of dull races.
You could, people have said
happens.
for years that now, and we did an entire episode of, can we get a British guy to appreciate NASCAR as a real motorsport, because it's just cars going around in a, quote unquote, just cars going around an oval. And you could argue that's boring. So when I want to make it very clear, I'm not saying that it's not competitive. I'm just saying what is that. My theory is that Americans like watching cars when they're watching motorsports, they like watching cars be close together and be fighting for position all the time. So to be clear,
I appreciate that. But I think part of the product that F1 brings is the fact that it is a Formula series, and some of the most exciting things are when you see admittedly you're not seeing 2 cars side by side, but when you're watching the timing screens and you can see someone just eating the gap to the guy in front of him, and it builds that suspense. I also think in the macro, Formula One, the way that teams develop over a season is itself interesting.
Yeah.
And the technical developments that are, available in Formula One are fundamentally nerdy. They are sometimes they are so asinine, it is hard to get excited. But when
Sure.
you see it on track, it gets exciting. I lost my complete mind last week when we saw Ferrari's
Yes.
rear wing
That was so
flip
cool.
180 degrees. It is so cool.
And like watching like the people like breaking down like those like zoomed in photos of, oh hey, Ferrari put this panel up that lets it use the exhaust as downforce and like stuff like that. Like so cool.
See, that's really cool. But like I think there is an assumed literacy for that. And I'm not saying that like Americans do not understand it. I'm just saying it's so that is an alien concept to spec series racing.
Yes, I would argue that's not where you're losing people though. I think where you lose people is like I think like you like to, as you acknowledge like an American audience can understand the like the dumb American stereotype. Like American audiences can very well understand those intricacies if they were told about them. The problem, at least for me, is that those intricacies, and as you can see them develop over the season, they don't end up mattering because, okay, cool. Maybe let's just throw out a team. Maybe Alpine found an extra 1/10 of a second in the straights. Okay, cool. Maybe they're fighting for 7th place. Like, that's hard to get excited about. When, again, we go back to the dominance piece, like, it's hard to get excited about those little edges outside of testing for me, which is why I'm excited for this year, because this is such an unknown that this could stretch beyond Bahrain and beyond Melbourne. I hope I didn't just like throw you completely off the rails there, but like that's to me like the results matter.
Like yeah, I guess. But like that's the same point again, right? Like you want your grievance with Formula One is that the field is too spread out, right? That there is too much of a disparity between great teams and less great teams.
Yeah, or even great teams and very good teams. Like I personally like the joke of 2023 that we were talking about, that being a historically terrible season, where like people would put tape over their TV and like, oh, this is cool when you're like watching for the race for 2nd place. And like that goes with the constructors, it goes with the drivers, like everything. Like it feels, the gaps are so wide that like I can only get excited about, okay, is Mercedes or Ferrari going to get 2nd or 3rd? I can only get so excited about that for so long. Like but
okay, so not to take us all the way back to episode 15,
go for it.
but like,
what's the point?
But like the spectrum between American and European models of sport is not a line, it's a horseshoe. And when it comes down to competitiveness, both have very different ways of achieving their competitive balance. In European, it's obviously you can spend what money you want, albeit with some limitations. And the teams that are the best at it build a large, the teams with the most money and the most talented engineers build their leads. And over here, in American sports, not speaking specifically about NASCAR and IndyCar, because I don't know how some of the other, competitive balance restrictions work. But like, no one thinks the Atlanta Falcons are going to win the Super Bowl ever.
Yeah.
No one ever thinks the Jaguars, or bizarrely, no one's looking at the Clippers. Well, maybe that's a bad example. No one's looking at like the Wizards and thinking, yeah, I've got the Wizards for the for the
But, to be clear, nobody
yeah.
thinks bad about the Clippers either. You were fine either way.
Okay, I just know the Clippers had a good guy on their team
Yeah,
like
yeah.
5 years ago.
Yeah.
But like if that's the case, if your grievance is there as well, why doesn't that apply to No, and that's really lazy arguing.
I don't know. I don't think it is. No. I don't think that is lazy argument. That is I think what ends up being like a fundamental frustration or divide sometimes with these with kind of our systems of sport. Like I think that's a total thing. And my argument back to that would be that remember how I forgot that the Super Bowl happened?
True, yeah.
But no, but yeah.
Did Americans? We know this because nobody likes a winner. Everyone loves a winner until they don't. Right? We've said that so many.
Yeah.
So we talked a couple of episodes ago about the New England Patriots and their dynasty, right?
Yeah.
And that is in the NFL, which is the most optimized version of this American model of sport.
Yep.
That was a time when NFL was also boring.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting is because of the conference systems, there's no way of directly comparing how well any two teams are doing fairly because not everyone plays everyone the same amount. Whereas in F1, everyone races each other all the time.
Yeah.
I think there is an observation issue there. And it's the same with football leagues in countries smaller than like America, where the MLS doesn't work for the same reason.
Yeah.
I acknowledge your point that like the competitiveness should be closer. I would though say I think the American systems, and again I cannot speak specifically to NASCAR and IndyCar, I think the American systems do well to make sure you don't notice that the same gulfs exist in American sports.
I think that is so well put.
Thank you.
That's it.
I don't know why I'm defending Formula One so much.
No,
I actually agree.
No, yeah, I was gonna say that's the thing is like I don't want the takeaway from this conversation to be like that there's like a ton of disagreement here. And what as you've been talking about this, I think what I'm realizing is that there's a difference. I don't think that this like disappointment that I have, because I don't want it to make it sound like I don't like Formula One and that I like watch a bunch of IndyCar and NASCAR. I probably watch more F1 than I watch any other motorsport. I watch NASCAR here and there, but like I'm not a diehard motorsports fan. I'm just not. I think, but I can appreciate, and as you and I talk about all the time, like you love American sports. I love in that culture. I love the model of European sports and that culture, and that's why we made this podcast. I think there's a little bit of like conflating. Formula One's just not been that good since I started watching it. Like it's just not been like as good as like when you started watching it, and you and a bunch of other, diehard fans of it are fine with that because you came up with it, and that's not going to make your love of the sport wane. Like I'm able to sustain some really bad years I've been able to sustain some like bad years of baseball over the seasons because I love baseball, and same with hockey, like I think there's just something to it of how we like sports in general.
That's why this year is so important.
Yes.
That's why what we're seeing in testing, these new rules, that's why this is so critical that F1 sticks the landing here. And it's a little bit worrying when you see drivers say these cars aren't as exciting to drive, or they are that everyone's worried, everyone's losing their minds about how slow the cars are. That so doesn't matter. The time it takes the cars to lap the track doesn't matter. It all comes down to how easy they are to overtake, which we won't know until Melbourne, unless somebody, Ferrari, hopefully builds a rocket ship and we get the eighth title. But I think your point is so right, because I started watching Formula One in 2008 when Hamilton got his first title. Then in 2009, we had maybe the greatest season we've ever had, where out of nowhere, huge rule changes like we had in 26, not as extensive as 26, but close. Huge rule changes, one underfunded garage team that came from the embers of a Honda team that were told to pack up and go home, just found a loophole that was worth multiple seconds a lap. And they happened to have one of the most charismatic and sweet guys in the right car at the right time. And we had the Cinderella story that was Braun GP that won the title that year.
And
then they
Keanu
disappeared
Reeves
and
was
they turned
Ford.
into Mercedes.
Yeah.
It was incredible. I think everyone wants that to happen this year.
Totally.
And the thing is, we also have 2 new teams this year. A whole other reason for America to get excited is that for the first time, Cadillac are in and they are like throwing everything at it. They're not going to be competitive this year.
They're throwing billions of dollars.
Maybe they pull a Braun.
Yeah, they're throwing like $1 billion. They're overworking their entire staff. They're like, it's just, they're doing everything that they possibly can to make a competitive product.
They've got 2 good drivers.
Yeah.
Albeit neither of them are American, which surprised me.
They unveiled their car during the Super Bowl. I think they're either the reserve driver or their test driver is American. I forget which one, but they have that at least.
Yeah. So this is my plea to you and the rest of our 80%, the 80% rule, to just give us 2026 to sort of let Formula One get exciting again. And if it is, I quickly, before we move on to the 2-minute warning question, I want to rapid fire 3 other possible barriers.
Whoa, okay.
And I'm just going to ask you, as a passive American fan, do you think any of these are also or potentially bigger barriers for for Formula One growing in America?
Okay, let's go for it.
Is Formula One too global to appeal to the majority of American sports fans, or specifically American motorsport fans?
I don't think so, outside of time zones. I think that's the only issue.
Okay, then I'll skip to my next one. Is Formula One races being held for American audience, for European audiences? The effect of that is races are often very early in the morning in America.
Yep.
Do you think that's a significant barrier?
I think it's a significant. I think that's less of a significant barrier. I think the significant barrier is that it's not at a consistent time. If you want to get into the Premier League, you're going to get up and watch between 9 and 11 a.m. on the East Coast. Formula One, it's tough to tell.
And the last one that I think we have covered is the technical difference between NASCAR and IndyCar and Formula One. Do you think there is an appetite, not a literacy, do you think there is an appetite for that difference? Because the way that Formula One teams interpret and reinterpret the rules to find those edges is the difference between it being a individual sport and a team sport. More so, I think, than NASCAR is.
I don't think so, because I think the drivers are still so big. And like you said, about those things that Liberty has done and encouraged teams to do, to humanize their drivers more and humanize team personnel more. Like, I think there's definitely appetite for it. I just don't know that again, kind of going back to the competitiveness of it, I don't know that the past several years have made it so that it feels like the competition itself is as exciting.
Okay, so that perfectly brings us to our 2-minute warning question, which stays so closely to this theme. If you were made the head of the FIA, tasked with bringing one rule to make Formula One more interesting to Americans or to the legacy audience, what would you introduce?
I would figure out some way to outside of like basically just having blue shells from Mario Kart. I would figure out some way to shake up the field a little bit more often. So whether that's some sort of like I don't know. I had a thought on this and then I realized it didn't make sense. Like I had like when you asked me this earlier in the day, I thought about it and I had like an idea. My idea was basically to implement competition cautions, which is a thing that's in NASCAR sometimes where like they'll like freeze the field and put and basically do like a safety car just to like keep the field from spreading out too much. And they do that in not regularly. Actually, wait, no, they kind of do now because they have stage racing.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, they have stage racing. So they basically race in thirds, except for the longest race and they do it in quarters. But they race in thirds. So like you race to a flag that basically becomes like a caution flag and then most people pit and then they restart the race.
Why?
To make the racing more interesting throughout.
You're joking.
And I don't think they should do that.
How did we leave this to the last 2 minutes of the episode to find out that NASCAR's biggest strength over F1 is completely artificial?
Yeah.
Oh, Lord.
But I don't think it's a good
fine.
thing, so I don't want to add that in.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, fair enough. All right, let me tease you with mine because it answers a similar question, but from the other way around. My rule would be every team brings a third car. Every team develops a third car. The team at the top of the Constructors' Championship runs that third car, and every other driver gets one race a year in the car. That third car would be like
And they have to like pick like at their discretion what that race is.
No, maybe it goes round on a cycle,
Okay.
and everyone knows. Maybe it's stacked against their rankings from the previous season. But the question always is, every year, the debate comes up, who was better, Hamilton or Verstappen, because it comes down to their cars are better. Who's the better driver, we'll never know because they're never in the same car.
Yeah.
My idea is, whichever team are at the top of the constructors brings a third car, which is completely deliveried. It is the F1 livery, and that is the control car. And that is run by the same team with the same specs and the same like fundamentals, which are still like secret. The team don't have to give up their secrets. But then you bring Pierre Gasly and you put him in the Red Bull and you just see how well he does in one race.
Interesting.
And then their score there gets added only to the driver's champ. So it's like a boost. So give me a Ollie Behrman, good driver, not in the best car. What would he be like in a Red Bull? We find out. Oh, in Bahrain, in the Red Bull car, he comes fourth. Wow,
interesting.
That's so good. So that would be my rule. There is a third car, and then the other car that is left vacant when Behrman moves up is just filled by their reserve driver.
Yeah.
Give him a race. No team suffers a penalty.
Yeah.
But every driver gets to experience the fastest car, and then that can be its own little leaderboard. And you can see, oh my God, everyone this year in the McLaren, this is how they stacked up on the leaderboard.
Wow. I think they should throw out the restrictions on what you can improve during the season. Like, aren't there restrictions on, like, you can only, like, bring, like, you can't, like, make a certain type of engine upgrade. Like, you can obviously do some, but you can't, like, completely overhaul certain aspects of your engine. Like, they have to be approved at the beginning of the year, and then you use it throughout. Like, I'm right on that, right? Like, isn't that a
I
thing?
think so.
Yeah. But I feel like I've just read so much about, like, this team wanted to do this, but they couldn't because they had locked their engine. Or I think what I saw was actually that Ferrari had elected to go with a turbo this year that is more adept on certain tracks compared to others, but they can't switch it in the middle of the year because that's like an internal engine piece that you can't change around. So
their turbo this year is
it's like smaller,
far stronger at the start.
Yeah, because it
has
can
like
get
lower
more
top end
like,
power, but yeah,
great. All right, it's car talk, great. But no, I think you should be able to, like, to make those kind of changes throughout the season. I think it would make for way more fascinating, like, team dynamics throughout the year.
What if, to build off that, what if halfway through the season, one of the regulations at random is scrapped?
Sure, why not?
And they announce it in the summer break. They're like, by the way, the restriction on how many wheels you have.
Love it.
Go wild.
Yeah, bring that. Yeah, let that out. I want more 6-wheel cars that one team had in the 80s or whatever.
Tyrrell.
Anyway, yes.
So good.
Well, anyway, that was the, like, 10-minute warning, I guess, and this is the final whistle. So appreciate everybody for sticking through a little bit of a different episode this go around, but wanted to do something a little bit different for 30, and we're really excited. Thank you for watching. If you are watching on YouTube, please give us a like and check us out. Subscribe on Spotify. If you're on Spotify, please go check us out on YouTube. We're trying to boost the numbers on both of our accounts, but definitely appreciate your tuning into our Instagram and TikTok as well. If you've been following along, Harry has been doing an absolutely amazing job taking us through which American cities have the best named sports teams, and I'm excited to watch this keep happening. So thank you for that. Special thank you, as always, to producer Luke for our logo, and we'll see you next time.